Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 3, Episode 24. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. What's on tap for this week? No, it's not Four Idiots Discuss Sports. I did try to get that coordinated for you this week, dear listener, to discuss the exit of one Danny Boy Snyder as owner of the Washington football franchise. That episode is being placed on a brief hold for the sake of logistics, trying to get everybody's schedules coordinated. Hopefully I'll be able to bring that to you next week. This week, some familiar topics. Yes, we're going to have to dive back into UFOs. Yes, we're going to have to dive back into them there aliens. The hearings held this past week on aliens were sensational, had a lot of headlines, were the topic of the 48-hour news cycle on social media in particular. And now that this is all coming to a head in a public way, I feel it's a good thing. And Hunter Biden. Well, let's talk a little bit about Hunter Biden and the fact that the judge denying the plea deal that he struck with the Department of Justice. That's a reason for optimism. That's a positive sign insofar as our justice system is operating as intended. As always, thank you, dear listeners, for your patronage. I truly appreciate it. Please like, thumbs up, 5-star this podcast, write a review, send to people far and wide. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. If I can get 10 people supporting the podcast, I might actually start sending out emails to people. That's right. The wooden boy became a true podcaster. Let's do it.
Act 1, Moar Aliens.
The congressional hearings this week made for excellent headlines in the media. It was certainly quite the spectacle, and I guess if you were a longtime listener, you'd be inclined to think I'm going to come in and I'm going to dismiss it all. Frankly, I'm trying to take a different attitude when it comes to everything in my life, namely my skepticism about UFOs and aliens. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm giving any more credence to any of these claims. I'm satisfied, I'm content, I'm actually optimistic that we're going to have some sort of resolution to the entire UFO speculation, the phenomenon of speculation. So what do I mean by that? Well, this guy comes out, Dave Grosh, I think his name is, Dave Grush. I just had a Foo Fighters Nirvana moment where Dave Grohl, I know his name isn't Dave Grohl, let's go with Dave Grush, I believe that's the name. And you think, why don't you look it up? Yes, I should do more preparation for this podcast. I used to do a lot of preparation for this podcast. I'm not doing as much preparation now because I write these pieces out and I say to myself, hey, I'm going to go and do the research on the stuff that I used to do the research on, and then I'm so busy with work, I don't do it. You can write a letter to Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and demand a refund. So this guy, Dave Grush, that's what we're going to call him, he comes and he testifies, and I want to make this point. I'm trying not to be dismissive, trying not to be an asshole. Everything that he testifies to, at least the things that I saw, I didn't sit there like one of these alien sycophants. I didn't watch all of the testimony. I didn't see it all. Many of the things that I saw by way of clips, which of course is incomplete, it was third-party testimony. In other words, the man says, hey, I talked to this person. I talked to that person. I did not see incident, but I talked to person about incident, or I was tangentially involved in incident, but I wasn't the primary or the principal person that was involved in incident. As far as a witness, the man made a very credible witness, seeing the testimony, seeing the clips that I did. The problem being, as an attorney, you fall back into attorney mode. It's all hearsay. This isn't a person who says, hey, I worked on this project. I saw this. I was involved in this. This happened to me. It's all third party. Principal told me X. This other party told me Y. Makes for great window dressing. Makes for great television. Certainly, that's basically what Congress is these days, and probably has been since, the founding of the Republic. window dressing and fodder for media, regardless of whether or not that media is television, whether or not it's social media, whether or not it was the printing press. Do we have cold hard facts? No, we do not. A lot of empty calories about aliens. Yet, there's this kernel of hope. And what is that? Someone's going to be proven a liar. This is public enough. This is high profile enough. Someone is going to be proven a liar. Either it's this guy, this Dave Grush, or it's going to be the Pentagon. And that is what I'm looking forward to. That's what I'm optimistic about. That's the point of this entire segment. Okay, man comes on to the public scene. He's getting his 15 minutes and he says things. Well, those things are so incendiary, are such a part of the fabric of this long-held science fiction landscape. It's got our imagination. It has captured our imagination. And are we going to let it go? Of course not. So something's going to happen. Now, I don't know as much as many of you likely do because I only look at certain elements of these types of stories. One of the things that caught my eye was the fact that if you don't realize this, there are many different types of congressional hearings where people will come in and say, hey, based on the law, based on things that I'm bound to, I can't reveal that in a public setting. If we can go into a private setting, basically a secure setting, I can reveal that information to members of Congress. And members of Congress in those settings are bound to secrecy. A great example of this was the Iran-Contra hearings. A lot of people don't remember this as part of the hearings. They remember the spectacle of the hearings. If you're not old enough, you can go on the YouTube. It's not the same type of phenomenon because you didn't live through it. But the Iran-Contra hearings were on TV every single day. You didn't have 5,000 channels plus social media. You had very few outlets, and those hearings dominated the outlets. Now, if you don't know what the Iran-Contra hearings were or what they were about, Google it because I really don't want this segment to be so long that I have to explain the circumstances that led up to the congressional hearings that were dubbed Iran-Contra. Okay, a 30-second overview. Basically, the Reagan administration stated that they would not negotiate with terrorists, Iran, for the release of the hostages that were taken in the 1979 coup, the overthrow of the Iranian government, the Shah getting kicked out, and they turned around and did negotiate with those quote-unquote terrorists, the people that took over the country of Iran, the Ayatollah, the religious, the far-right Islamic clerics that ended up ruling Iran and still rule Iran to this day. It's hard for any of you to remember that are younger than the age of 40, but we all were worried about communism back in the day. Communists were infiltrating many a country in Central and South America, in the Caribbean, basically in the Western Hemisphere, the American Hemisphere. And in fear of that, the United States had many a covert operation against such communism, such communists. One of those countries was El Salvador. Congress authorized money to be used to fight communism in El Salvador. Turns out it was a complete and total shit show. Then they removed said funds. And what did the Reagan administration do via the CIA? They made a deal with Iran. The Reagan administration would give American technology, military technology, basically missiles and equipment to arm F-14 fighter jets, which prior to the revolution, the U.S. military was deeply invested in the Shah's government, and they had very capable, very up-to-date American military technology. The U.S. agreed to sell that technology to the Iranian government and use the money in order to fund the anti-communist movement in El Salvador, thereby usurping the authority of Congress. Well, guess what? It all came out in the end. As covert as that operation was, it all fell apart in roughly 3 to 4 years. So, what's the analogy? Why am I going with this? Well, first and foremost, a lot of people don't remember this. Many of the most top secret discussions, many of the most top secret revelations, many of the most top secret witnesses, they provided their testimony in top secret congressional hearings. So the Congress people who were involved in those hearings, they were bound to secrecy about what the testimony was. This too can be used in these latest hearings, and my understanding is that many of these Congress people are saying, well, we tried to get this guy into a top secret congressional hearing so that he could disclose names, places, dates, yet we were denied access. And that triggered something in me. We were denied access. Congress itself has the power to create these top secret congressional hearings. So I'm curious as to, well, we were denied access. We wanted to do this, but we were prohibited from doing so. Who prohibited you? That's the story. The story isn't aliens. The story isn't whistleblower. The story isn't whether one person is lying, whether an organization is lying. You've got a guy who's willing to testify. You've got an outlet that you can use to elicit this testimony. Who's preventing you from creating the medium, the forum? And even if there is someone, some organization, some person preventing it, eventually it's all going to come out. It's just a matter of time. Somebody's lying. Is it this guy, Dave Grush? Is it the Pentagon? Is it the Congress people who are saying they're very interested in this? They want this man to come in and testify in a closed hearing so he doesn't violate the law, he doesn't violate his oath, he's not subject to criminal penalties from the Pentagon. Eventually it's all going to come out. Am I going to bash? Am I going to ridicule the alien enthusiast? No, there's no point to it. There's no reason to, because it's just a matter of time. And given that I'm not that anxious about the outcome, I could give a damn one way or the other, time is on my side.
Act 2 Hunter Biden, a rejected plea deal, an optimism in a pessimistic world.
Bill Cosby put drugs into women's food and drink. He had sex with them while they were lying there, dormant, dead like corpses, and he got away with it for years. And when he was finally caught, when he had to admit to as much, he got a sweetheart deal from a prosecutor, he got immunity for his crimes, and he was able to continue committing those crimes. Jerry Sandusky had a very prominent, that's probably the right word, he had a very popular, prominent youth group, youth camp at the Penn State University campus as part of the fabric of the athletic department, and he touched young men in inappropriate ways, and he made those young men touch him in inappropriate ways. And he did so for years, and eventually he was caught. And when he was caught, he had to admit to as much, and he got a sweetheart deal from a prosecutor that absolved him of many of his crimes, if not all of them, and he was allowed to continue to commit those crimes. Jeffrey Epstein, he liked them young. He liked them innocent. He liked them neglected and abandoned. And he touched them. And he made them touch him in many inappropriate ways. And these young women, well, they went to the police, and eventually he was caught. And he had to admit to as much. And he got himself a sweetheart deal from the prosecutor. And he received immunity for many of the crimes that he had committed, if not all of them. And he was able to continue committing those crimes. We've discussed as much on the podcast in previous episodes. What is the point of bringing all this up? Well, we've got a guy. We've got a guy named Hunter. And Hunter, he's committed himself some crimes. And it's not so much limited to any one specific type of crime. Let's give him some credit. He doesn't discriminate when it comes to crimes. He likes to commit a lot of different types of crimes. Some of them you'd call rather benign, you'd call rather innocent. Some of them, well, they're more nefarious. And that man was allowed to commit crimes for a long time until he got caught. And then he had to admit that he had committed some crimes. And the prosecutors were ready to give him a sweetheart deal. And the judge looked at that deal and said, I don't know that I can accept this. Now, let's take everything that I just said and put it into perspective. And I led you down this path for a reason, dear listener. The one thing that I didn't add at the end of all of those other people. Who? Who were those other people? Well, we had Bill Cosby. We had Jerry Sandusky. We had Jeffrey Epstein. All three of those people who received these almost miraculous, these mind-boggling sweetheart deals, we blamed the prosecutor, right? And I did it right here on purpose. Point the finger at the prosecutor. Takes two to tango, right? Everything in the prosecutor's file, that's submitted to the judge. The judge is well aware of what the person is being accused of, what they've admitted to, and what the deal is, the plea deal that both parties are proposing is a fair and equitable punishment for these crimes. So add in to the culpability the perpetrator, the prosecutor, and the judge. Look at Hunter Biden's crimes. Are they as heinous as Bill Cosby's? No, they're not. Are they as heinous as Jerry Sandusky's? No, they are not. Are they as heinous as one Jeffrey Epstein? No, they are not. Was he getting a plea deal, a sweetheart deal that was akin to any of the deals that they received? Yes, he was. And was it accepted by the judge? No, it wasn't. Things are getting better, dear listener, and it may just simply be the public spectacle that surrounds these cases now. There isn't a case where you can have a high-profile personality, no matter who it is anymore, that is going to completely escape the public eye because of social media. Things are getting better. The wide scope of the public eye that is social media does not allow for these things to be unnoticed, to be missed. Granted, I don't think there's any era where the president's son would not be part of the media landscape, would not be a high-profile case, would not be front-page news. But the fact that the judge looked at the deal and just said, this is too strange. There are too many peculiarities in this. And it leads one to believe that it's special treatment. The fact that she did as much, it shows progress. This is that incremental progress that we're always looking for. We want things to just change. We want that aircraft carrier to turn on a dime. It simply doesn't. This is the incremental change that we want to see. This is how we measure that things are getting better.
Act 3 Danny Boy Snyder Prelude segment.
Because of conflicting schedules, complicated itineraries, I could not get the Four Idiots Discuss Sports coordinated this week. Thus no commentary on the sale of the Washington Commanders by one Danny Boy Snyder, the event that I thought never would happen, at least in my lifetime, even with the sum of a ridiculous sum of $6 billion. I never thought Danny Boy would want to sell. And it turns out I don't think he did want to sell. He was forced out by the other league owners and to sweeten that pot to make sure that he didn't throw a temper tantrum, whether it be in the public or in a court of law. Here's $6 billion to wash away those tears. So in lieu of an actual Four Idiots Discuss Sports segment, I wanted to comment very quickly on the fine the NFL levied on Danny Boy, the $60 million as a result of his actions as owner of the NFL franchise. Now, $60 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is. Is it a lot of money in light of someone being paid $6 billion? And again, billion with a B. $60 million in light of $6 billion. How much is that? Do the math. It's 1%. Dan Snyder was fined 1% of the money that he was paid for the Washington football team, whatever you want to call them. He was fined 1% on his way out for his conduct as owner, namely cheating the other owners out of revenue, although the public face of it was not the fact that he had cheated all of the other owners out of revenue that he owed them. No, the public face of it was all the things that we know that he had done over the course of the years that the NFL never penalized him for. Now, the stricter historians amongst you might turn around and say, well, he was penalized. He was fined. He had the whole episode where he couldn't attend the NFL meetings. He wasn't allowed to go to his own games. These are minor, minuscule penalties in light of the things that the NFL knew that Danny Boy was doing year after year after year. It wasn't until it was discovered that he was taking money out of the pockets of his fellow owners by keeping a separate set of books on the amount of profits that he was bringing in. That was when everyone agreed it was time to do something. Now, that $60 million fine levied against Dan Boy as he's trying to secure financing for his new stadium, that's a penalty. That's a fine. Levying a $60 million fine on someone who's getting $6 billion for the asset, $6 billion to put in his pocket for having run an asset directly into the ground, to me, it just shows how transparent the NFL actually is, which is to say, they know that we really don't care. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we really don't care. When the NFL comes back on in September, they're going to have as many eyes glued to the TV as they did last September. Some of these episodes, of course, are going to keep away new viewers. They're going to keep away some people that may have sworn off the Washington football team based on the tenure, the ownership of Dan Snyder. Most people are going to return. I likely won't have an opportunity to raise this point when we do the Four Idiots Discuss Sports segment. I swore off the Detroit Lions in this podcast. I talked about the divorce. I had many people come back and tell me, hey, I'm sure you're watching them. Tell me. I mean, I guess I need to really make that clear. People didn't ask me. They told me, well, I guess you're watching them again because they're good. I guess you're watching them again because they're winning. No. First of all, the Lions went 9-8 last season, winning their last game to get over 500. Was it nice to see the Lions get over on the Green Bay Packers? Aaron Rodgers' last game as a Green Bay Packer? Aaron Rodgers' last opportunity to go to the playoffs as a Green Bay Packer? Yes, that was satisfying. Can't get out of your ego when you're a sports fan. Can't get out of that pettiness. Yes, there was some satisfaction in watching that. Did that bring me back into the fold with the Detroit Lions? No, it did not. There may very well be many a Washington fan that stays away because they were so dissatisfied with what happened during the Dan Snyder tenure and realize that it's only another owner away, that the NFL, frankly, doesn't care. As long as the money keeps coming in, they'll allow the other owners to do pretty much whatever they want. Until it hurts their bottom line, their pocketbook, the brand, they don't care because the reality is we don't care. Over the course of years, may this impact the NFL's brand, its allure to new fans? I believe it will. That's one of the reasons I believe that the NFL has spent so much money and so much time in international outreach. The NFL is looking not for new fans in North America, younger people. The NFL is looking for new fans abroad, regardless of the demographic. The NFL, dear listener, is like tobacco companies. That's right. People in the U.S., people in North America, they really don't smoke anymore. People in Europe, people in Asia, people in Africa, well, they smoke cigarettes. And cigarette companies in this country are as popular in these other countries, in these other continents, Europe, Asia, Africa, as they were in the United States in the 1950s. I'm sure when I started this segment, you didn't think that I'd be comparing the NFL to tobacco companies. Well, I'm comparing NFL football to tobacco. I mean, look at cigarettes. Not good for you, and the companies that manufactured the product were scumbags. Look at football. Not good for you, not healthy for anyone that plays it, and the people that are involved in coordinating the sport are scumbags. In both cases, it's very likely, what I feel coming through me, we allowed these industries to be as scummy as they were. We didn't want to believe that cigarettes were as bad for us as they were because we love them so much. We don't want to believe that football is as bad for us as it is because we love it. And the people in charge of those things knew as much and took advantage of our love. One person stepping away from fandom, from patronizing the product, that doesn't mean anything. I am just one person. The NFL reaching out further into Europe, Mexico, into England, pushing further into Central and South America, pushing further into Europe. That's a sign that I'm not alone in stepping away from my football fandom. So the token action of the NFL fining Danny Boy Snyder on his way out $60 million in light of him receiving in compensation for the Washington football franchise $6 billion, that's just another nail in the coffin of my NFL fandom. Will I end up watching some NFL games this season? No doubt. Will I take it to heart? No, I won't. Will I end up watching some of the playoff games? Probably. It is a rite of passage in this country. There is a sense of community amongst people watching these games, particularly when you're going out and watching them in public. Will I, based on Dan Snyder's exit from the NFL ownership group, be more apt, be more likely to patronize the National Football League? No, I won't. Because the fact of the matter is, dear listener, you didn't have one Dan Snyder in and amongst the 32. You've got 32 Dan Snyders, and most of them have the wherewithal not to expose as much to the general public. This is Why Don't Vote, a podcast.